Hi guys. Before we proceed to this video, we've got something very important to share with you. Neoliberalism, Inequality and Authoritarianism by Professor John V. Kofis is available for purchase. You can order it directly from the publisher Little French eBooks or through Amazon.
Hello. 4 years ago, almost, the war between Russia and Ukraine started, and there was hope in January 2020 when President Trump came to office that it would end very soon, and especially after President Putin and President Trump met in Alaska, that there would be some progress, at least of a ceasefire and moving forward to some kind of an arrangement between Russia and Ukraine. However, now at the beginning of November 2025, we are at a situation where Russia, according at least to the statements from the Kremlin, has been testing some nuclear weapons, and President Trump gave the order for responding to that with America's own nuclear testing. I don't think he's going to be testing underground, but there has been an announcement there would be that, namely nuclear testing. So instead of a negotiated peace and some sort of a settlement between Ukraine and Russia, what we have is escalation that many analysts argue raises the risks, because nuclear weapons, by the way, historically have been much cheaper to produce, contrary to conventional opinion, much cheaper than spending on conventional forces, and obviously much more dangerous. And they are weapons never to be used, although they have been used, obviously, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. The war is really proof that on the surface there was the NATO expansion scheme behind supporting Ukraine, US-led NATO expansion scheme into the Transcaucasus region, the Black Sea, and then beyond that into Central Asia, so that the US-led NATO group would use its strategic influence in the Transcaucasus region and Central Asia in order to contain Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China. Those four, often called the axis of evil countries. Well, that was the idea. Another idea was to basically replicate what happened during the Reagan-Gorbachev era of the 1980s. Why not engage Russia in this proxy war in Ukraine and weaken it so that it collapses under its own weight, and the Putin regime and its gang are out, as though something better will replace it. And that too seems to have gone nowhere, because this is not the 1980s, primarily because China is really the big force behind the big gun, economic gun on a world scale, behind Russia. And right next to China, behind Russia, of course, we know, because Trump put sanctions on this country, namely India. So you have basically a stalemate. What we have in the Ukraine-Russia war is a stalemate. And it has manifested, this war has manifested in almost 4 years. In February 2026, it will be 4 years, unfortunately, with so much devastation on both sides. By the way, figures differ wildly depending who issues them, whether it's Ukraine, the Kremlin, some British intelligence firm. But no matter how you slice it, this is a This is a tragedy, and it's a tragedy that could have been solved diplomatically, but it was not. Anyway, it has shown, this war has shown that on the one hand, there are limits to the power of the US led G7 slash NATO group, severe limits. No military solution has been forthcoming. That is a reality. On the other hand, there are limits to the China, Russia, and minor allies group too. They have been intent on a military solution as well to weaken Ukraine, teach the West a lesson on this one, that there are limits to their ambitions of NATO expansion on a world scale. Okay, NATO, by the way, means North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It doesn't mean a world defense organization, US-led world defense organization. It's just North Atlantic Treaty. It comes right out of the out of World War II during the Truman era. It was designed basically during the East-West division of Europe to strengthen, to make sure that the Western countries were remain stable and strong. Now, after the Cold War is over, this is the irony of all this. After the old Cold War was over, and there were promises, at least according to the other side, but it's also in writing. There were promises that NATO would not expand to threaten the national security interests of Russia. Yet here we are. They have been trying to do exactly that, namely because Russia under Putin, after the Boris Yeltsin regime in the 90s was over and it weakened Russia considerably, the Russia of Putin was strengthened, and in its alliance with China led BRICS group, it revived. And so we are in a new Cold War with Russia as a geopolitical target for the West and China a geoeconomic one. The limitations go both ways. China Russia group, the China led BRICS group, has also failed, in my view, and maybe deliberately so. And I discussed this in the longer video that I invite all of you to watch in the analytical video on this topic. This is just a teaser video, which gives you a summary of what I'm going to be talking about. The Chinese have failed because they made it very clear. Xi Jinping, the president of China, has made it very clear. He's not going to accept the military defeat of Russia because it would give a complete opening to the US-led NATO group to penetrate Eurasia and Asia, and he's not going to accept that. So he's going to stick with the Kremlin on this one. The limitations on the other side are also interesting, and we have learned this throughout the 4 years, is that they can't win militarily. Here we thought that everybody thought Trump has made it, President Trump in the Oval Office has told Zelensky, among others, look, you're fighting a major military power. You can't win. By the way, just for the record, Russia has the world's most nuclear warheads. It's not the US, it's Russia. But what good are they? They can't use them against anybody, actually. If they do, there is mutual assured destruction, the mad doctrine back of the early Cold War. So here we are. The G7 group has used, however, this protracted war to see that Russia-China, the Russia-China-led BRICS group is contained. Containment is now the goal. It's no longer to expand NATO. I don't think they have the capability. They have proved that. They had 4 years. They have failed. On the other hand, so has the other side, because they haven't defeated Ukraine either. Despite, by the way, some troops on the ground from various pro-Russia, pro-China allies, the unfortunate thing of all this is that the There have been a lot of people, millions of people displaced, roughly 25%, maybe as many as a third in Ukraine, hundreds of thousands dead on both sides, um, massive destruction to the infrastructure of Ukraine, massive destruction, territory lost estimated roughly about 20-25%, depending where Russia settles on this issue. And it seems that corporations and oligarchs and state-owned as well as private companies in China, but also private companies in India, Western companies, Russian, Chinese, Indian, have made a killing, pardon the expression, from this war, as they did, many of these companies, not all, in the Israeli, as they have in the Israeli war, as the United Nations, by the way, rapporteur for Palestine, Francesca Albanese, pointed out in her report that corporations are profiting. Now, the question is, are we in for militarism as a way of life because the United States led G7/NATO group has no leverage other than military? It can't really compete at the level of China led BRICS group, whose GDP is ahead of the G7. It's higher than the G7. Are we in for a war of attrition with no end in sight? I believe peace will come. It obviously will come. I believe that Xi Jinping will see the light eventually and compel his partner in the Kremlin to come to the negotiating table and make some hard decisions about concessions, territorial, obviously, also about economic integration. I mean, that's inevitable. The western part of Ukraine has always been leaning, tilting toward Europe, Western Europe, not Russia. The eastern part, that's another story. Historically, obviously, those who know the history of Russia, the Soviet Union, and before that, Imperial Russia. So, but there will be peace. It will come at a huge cost. One last point I want to make here is that this war of 4 years now, almost 4 years, obviously, in February 2026, it will be 4 years, has exposed the hypocrisy, the double standards of the West, because there was another war, namely in Israel, the genocide war, as the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and the United Nations and international human rights organizations call it. The genocide war exposed the hypocrisy that there is no moral high ground, there is no moral superiority on the part of the G7/NATO group, US led, because they were supporting the aggressor, Israel, against civilians in Gaza and making corporations making a lot of money. Again, I refer you to the Francesca Albanese report on corporations profiting off genocide. I invite all of you to please take a look at the longer video. We'll analyze the almost fourth anniversary, unfortunately, regrettably, of this tragedy in Ukraine. Millions of people suffering, hundreds of thousands dead, massive destruction to the economy. No matter how you look at it, by the way, Ukraine loses. Ukraine loses. Russia is not exactly a winner, in my view. If there is one and maybe one and a half winner, the major winner in this is China. Let's face it. The US led NATO group, G7 NATO group, managed to strengthen China because it engaged in this proxy war, alienate much of the global south, as we have seen. It's regrettable how inept this foreign policy, which started, by the way, it has nothing to do with Trump, it started with Biden and the neoconservatives. The only thing Trump has to take responsibility for is exactly what he promised when he ran for president, that he would end this war. And of course, now he's in a position of announcing to the world he's ready to test nuclear weapons because Russia is not willing to come to the negotiating table and so forth. We'll look into this in more detail. Thank you very, very much for watching. By the way, I invite all of you, please subscribe to this channel, and by all means also take a look at the longer video. Thank you.